Hi, everyone. A big welcome to today's webinar, Mistakes to Avoid When Going Hybrid, featuring our very special guests, Will Curran, founder and chief event Einstein at Endless Events. Hi, Will. Brad Langley, site, vice president of enterprise and channel markets for Aventry. Hi, Brad.
Hello.
Give a wave. And Steph Filesticker, Senior Meeting Manager, Logiplan, Global Meetings and Events. Welcome, Steph. Hi, give us a wave.
Hi.
Okay. I'm Regina Baraban. I'm Senior Editor of Prevue Magazine. I'm your moderator for the next hour. Please be sure to ask questions using your webinar console. And at the end, we're going to have a little time for Q&A. So please feel free to enter those questions as we go along during the next hour. It's important to know, don't worry if you need to leave for any length of time, because today's session is being recorded and you will receive a link via email so that you're not going to miss anything. I'm going to start by first thanking our very important sponsor, Kiowa Island Golf Resort. A great big thank you to Kiowa. And kind of break the ice with you guys before I turn it over to the group by asking you a question. As life is starting to come back, along with meetings this summer, are you planning a summer vacation? Let us know, and let us know where you're going. And I'll share that. For me, my first travel in more than a year is next week. I'm going to Minneapolis to visit with family, and I could not be more excited. So, anybody else have any vacation destinations to share? How
Brad,
about our
you look
panelists?
excited. I think Brad's got one. He's got one. He's like on the tip of his tongue.
I can't wait. We're actually going back to Disney World to check out the Star Wars exhibit with all my Klingon friends. And so we're climbing the walls. I don't know about anybody else, but it's just we're ready to break out and get outside.
Cool. Well, we've got some answers coming in. Fabulous places. Outer Banks, North Carolina. Asbury Park in July. MPI, Las Vegas. Visiting, oh wait, is this Prague or Paraguay? I can't quite tell. Prague in August.
Nice.
With the running group. Wow, a cruise is being planned. Staycations, Aruba in September. South Beach, where I am broadcasting from today. Crazy, fun, lots of culture, beautiful beach, lots of fun. What have I missed? Fort Myers, Southern California, Fort Lauderdale, Hershey, Pennsylvania, family in New York, a friend in Houston, many of us visiting friends and family. Cool. Amelia Island, Florida, Oahu, Hawaii, Croatia in September. I'm jealous. So this is great. And I know we are all so excited about travel. So now I'd like to ask each of our panelists to please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and give us a definition of what hybrid meeting means to you. And how it's different from a straight virtual meeting. Will, would you like to start?
Happy to start. Hey, everybody out there in the audience. My name is Will Curran, Chief Event Einstein of Endless Events. If you haven't heard of Endless Events before, oh my gosh, I need to get you out from underneath that rock. please check us out. Feel free to Google Endless Events. Also, during the entire webinar, I have my Twitter open. So if you want to engage with me outside of the Q&A panel, feel free to tweet me. Just search Will Curran. You see my name on the panel, and you'll find me pretty quick on Twitter. And yeah, basically, when it comes to hybrid events, we've been talking about this a lot. As a company, as a thought leader in the events industry, I know that everybody's looking to us to find out what that definition is. And if I give you one simple definition, one sentence is, I believe the definition of hybrid events is not considering a virtual audience over here and an in-person audience over here, but finding ways for them to merge together. So then that way, an attendee who is virtual or in person have the same quality of experience, whether they're either or, and they don't feel like the fly on the wall, they don't feel FOMO, but they feel like they're getting that same level of quality of experience. It doesn't mean they're getting the exact same experience, but the same level of quality experience. So that's my short definition, but yeah. Should I toss it over to Steph?
Cool.
Give
Thank you, Will.
introduction?
That sounds perfect.
Great. Well, thanks, Will. I am Steph Filesticker with Logiplan Meetings and Events, and I've been a planner for about 20 years or so in association and corporate planning. I did my first virtual event in 2011 and have been planning them ever since. I owned a Hybrid Events Authority, which was a first of its kind consulting business, consulting in hybrid events, closed in January of 2019. So my timing wasn't great. I didn't know a pandemic was coming and that people might need my services that badly. But I really do enjoy what I do and love hybrid events and excited to talk about them today. Now, what is a hybrid event? I have a very short and sweet definition. It's an in-person meeting that's streamed to a virtual audience.
Great. Thank you, Steph. Brad,
Sure.
take it away.
Absolutely. Delighted to be here today. I'm Brad Langley, Global VP for Enterprise and Channel Markets for Eventry. And the way I first answer what is a hybrid event is I usually ask my planners that I'm working with, because I found that each one tends to define them a little differently. Like, I love Will's definition, and to me, that's what I would stick with, but it often really lands in the eye of the beholder. What I would say it's important to keep in mind is a live stream event is not necessarily a hybrid event, because what you want to do, effective events are interactive, whether they're in person, virtual, or hybrid. So what we're trying to do is create a similar situation where they can feel they're participating equally, regardless of whether they're live or watching it virtually. What happens though is I've seen on the gamut of events, a broad spectrum of what planners define as hybrid. Some say, well, it's got to be the exact same experience for the attendees, regardless of whether they're participating virtually or in person. When others say, no, my hybrid event is actually a live event where we have recorded content that we market to our attendees afterwards, where we promote maybe the general session and the top 10 speakers, almost like a Netflix type thing afterwards. So I really make sure and ask my customers, tell me your definition, because it will dramatically impact your budget, your resources, how you measure and deliver your event in your definition of hybrid event.
Thank you, Brad. The next question, which let's start with Steph, is given our varying definitions of hybrid meetings, do you think that some version of a hybrid meeting is going to become the new normal moving forward post-pandemic?
Yeah, I definitely do. And I've felt that way for a few years. I felt like we've been building towards this hybrid event world. In 2014, I remember I was at MPI WEC, and I had a chance to talk to Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari and Chuck E. Cheese. And I had asked him, because he's just a brilliant mind, future of meetings kinds of things, just very interesting man. So I said, you know, what are the future of virtual events? And he said, this is 2014. He paused for a while, and then he said, well, in 50 years, there's going to be no difference between an in-person event and a virtual event. And I really thought, oh, wow, yep, I bet he's right, you know? And so hybrid is just a step on in the way to get to that point.
Wow, interesting. Any other comments? Okay, so now for the sort of tough question. What can each of you share a story about your most challenging hybrid meeting experience? Who would like to start? Will?
I'm full of stories. Yeah, I don't know if you want me to go down story mode right now, but
5 minutes.
I'm happy to for sure.
Short story.
So I think what's really interesting is I think pre-pandemic the virtual audience always felt like a second class citizen. I mean, Steph, you've been doing this for years and years, so like I mean, you're the pro when it comes to this sort of thing. But I've always felt like people tended to want to treat it almost like a fly on the wall, right? We'd say things like, "Hey, okay, so you're going to live stream your audience," and they'd be like, "Yeah, let's just throw a camera in the back and we'll just push up there." And I go, "No." I don't know if you've ever watched a TV broadcast, but they don't just have one camera following you around. I also think at the same time too that a lot of times too they never found a way to start to have the audiences interact with each other, right? You would say things like, "Oh yeah, maybe they're lucky that they got a Q&A panel." When we were starting to do hybrid events pre-pandemic, we were telling them that, hey, like you need to make sure they're on the same platform. But I think that one of the biggest horror stories that I've ever seen, and it happens, and I can't specifically say it happens once because it happens all the time, every single time that someone's like, "Oh yeah, let's just live stream it," is that they say, "Oh yeah, like we'll just live stream it, we'll give them a chat, they can talk to each other," and then it just feels like it's this like other group over here, and then people in person don't even know there's a live stream going on. And I think there's a couple combinations of that. Not all being on the same platform, which I'm a huge proponent of. I think it's not acknowledging the audience and not giving speakers who really understand the idea of like looking at a camera and addressing the live audience. And then I think the second piece too is not designing the entire event to create those collisions between those attendees. Encouraging, for example, the in-person attendees to have the virtual chat open up on their phone. Yeah, they're paying attention to the speaker, but hey, let them have the chat so they can look down and see that there's all these people who are also attending the event virtually as well. So I think that's a big common thing I'm seeing. And what's so funny is I thought that we would have learned our lesson coming out of the virtual world, where we really learned how to produce great virtual events over this last year. But then now I'm hearing the exact same stories happen all over again. We're having new clients come to us and they go, "Oh yeah, we're looking at doing an in-person event." So, okay, great. So what platform are we going to use to bring the virtual attendees? And they go, "Oh, we're not even going to do a virtual audience." And I go, "Oh, that's a big mistake on there too." So yeah, I'm not sure. Brad, are you seeing the same things?
Yeah, it's really interesting because Eventry did a study recently, very recently, that said 89% of the planners in the study said they're going to use virtual moving forward. So even after the lockdown ends. So that's what Steph's comment about how those are coming together, I think is very true. Because really, I would say nothing beats the face-to-face, but for driving leads and the benefits of virtual events are just too strong to ignore in the whole picture, from not just reducing risk, the cost of travel for the attendee, creating new revenue streams, better data in the long term around participation, attendee behavior, inclusivity, reducing geographic boundaries. I mean, right now there are some restrictions on international travel. So how else do you bring that audience into your event except virtually? So Eventry is really betting heavily on the future of hybrid events. But what's key, and Will just mentioned it, he said, regardless of the type of event you're organizing, people need something that's easy to plan, one platform, easy to register, easy to engage the attendees, easy to switch back and forth between the two to create a single environment, and easy to show ROI. The good news is the advanced technology providers are putting all of that in one solution in one place. The tough part is some planners are still dealing with 4 to 5 different tech tools to try and marry all this, And they're running really fast in the back end going, okay, I got to pull this data from here and got to pull this from here and got to marry it in here, where really you're working too hard. You're listen closely to me on that one. You're working far too hard. There are tools like Eventries, but we're not the only one that can offer a complete end-to-end solution for your in-person, your virtual, your hybrid, your combo. You can shift with just the flip of a switch. So what we're seeing is the tools are evolving and innovating as the market is requiring it, which is great. One of the key things, back to your question about some of the challenges, the greatest challenges with hybrid events that I would say is we've seen some people successfully conquer the two greatest challenges, in my opinion, which are basically very large events managed virtually and keeping engagement. How do you do that? Because the moment you lose someone's engagement, maybe if the speaker's not looking at the camera or the content goes dry, then you lose your audience. So really, what we've seen is, for instance, we have the ability to tailor the communication, the invitation to create sub-communities of interest within the virtual or hybrid event, and then allow them to break off and focus on topics of interest to them. Let them drive some of that agenda in smaller groups. I think the beauty of virtual is you can attract so many more people, but you can't stop there. You need to break it down into sub-communities, or else people feel lost, they don't feel part of it. So that's where I would say, like our tool allows them to really break it down into sub-communities of interest.
It's very interesting. It almost sounds to me as if the virtual meeting initially is complicated because we're really talking about two different types of meetings or multiple types of meetings. However, there are tools that planners can use to create this new type of hybrid meeting that works on all these different levels and moves forward smoothly and effectively. That's the layman's language. Steph, what doesn't sound right? If it's not right, please correct me. Steph, what are your comments on the greatest challenges that you've experienced with a hybrid meeting?
Yeah, well, and this is kind of feeds into a story, one of my challenging hybrid event stories. It was only my second hybrid event, and so we're talking 2011, 2012, somewhere around there. And it was a big shareholder meeting for a financial services company. And we were in Miller Park in Milwaukee, so a professional baseball stadium. And one of the challenges was we had about 1,500 people, and the chat board was just going up and down with all the chatting that was going on. And you had 1,500 people. We didn't do what Brad suggested with communities and trying to subdivide people into their self-selected community. Doing that would have been perfect, because that definitely is a challenge, and I get that question quite a bit. What do I do if I have 10,000 people at an event? My chat box won't work. And no, it won't. Not for 10,000 people. Yeah, I mean, you couldn't even read the chats. It was going by so fast. So that was one of the challenges I experienced. And another one at that same event was internet. It was still early in the game, and the IT people we were working with at the stadium, thought they understood our requirements for internet, and it was a half-page document of what we needed and what needed to be open and shut and everything like that. And they really didn't know what we needed. We didn't find that out till the game start, or the shareholder meeting started, and our internet went out. came back on eventually, but we lost 1,500 people. And, luckily we got them back. But yeah, it was definitely a challenge. And we found out later, some of the reasons why it went down. And it definitely is, a different world now. We're not facing that as much anymore. But it was a challenge back then.
Wow, very interesting. And go ahead, just to let everybody know, I see some interesting questions coming in. Thank you. And we will get to them at the end of the session. Brad?
I was just going to say, Steph, it's amazing because I can only imagine from 2011 till now, all the changes. I mean, like, we're incorporating artificial intelligence to help matchmaking. At that time, I mean, people had to do it on their own. And, and that's where it's come a long ways. At times, I'll bet you had to advocate for people to do virtual. They were like, what's this virtual?
Yeah. Oh, I had to be a salesperson, definitely.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, we've come in the last year, I could just say it has dramatically exploded as far as the knowledge as well as tools that are available. So literally, Aventry launched their own virtual solution middle of last year, toward actually more closer to Q3. We're actually launching our second generation of this tool already. Now, if you had looked back 5 years ago, it would take 2 to 3 years to launch a second generation product. But that's how fast and how much investment is going into this space right now. That's what I'm saying. We're investing heavily in hybrid. But it's mind blowing to me sometimes when I think of how it's changed so rapidly and for the better. So, great new tools for people.
Can I add one thing if it's okay, Regina?
Absolutely.
I think all of you said like something really important that people have to start to think about how everything's changed now in the last year as well when it comes to thinking about hybrid moving back. And that is that, it's not going to be this, oh, hey, we're going back to 1,000 people in a ballroom immediately. It's funny how you see how many people are traveling domestically and that we feel comfortable very much in the United States. Shout outs to all of our international attendees who are out there right now. Let us know in the question box that you're watching internationally. But I think that we have to remember that there's still a pandemic going on across the entire world. Like just look on the news and what's happening so many other places. So it's going to be this slow rollout, let alone that's talking about like the safety of vaccines and everything like that. Not even talking about attendee trust. We're not going to be going back to these 1,000-person meetings. We're going to be coming back to 10 people in a room, 25 people, 50 people slowly. And Steph, you mentioned that you guys were in Miller Park, and I think this is such a great opportunity right now for the events industry to put a reset button on venues, because right now when it comes to venues, everyone's thinking, gotta go back to like, the Marriotts and the Hiltons of the world. But really, this is our opportunity to go to those alternative venues that we've been dying to go to give that unique experience and for us to get really creative when it comes to our meetings and our events now moving forward. And shout outs, thank you so much, Jen, for posting it. We did a webinar talking about like how people have to think about things like internet and the studio space and being quiet and things like that. So we actually did a whole webinar talking about these venues, but I think people have to think now differently about their events from the beginning. That's starting with the venue, but think about the design of your event. Think about the apps that you're using, like Brad's talking about. There's so many opportunities right now for us to like hit a gigantic reset button. I'm stoked for it in so many ways.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Will. I'd like to throw a question now back to all of you in the audience listening. As was mentioned, we're not fully out of the pandemic, and yet live meetings are starting up again. So I'm curious to know who among you out there are planning a live meeting right now, and when's it going to be and where's it going to be? And if it's not too complicated, put down a yes if it has a hybrid element.
Ooh, so like describe the entire event they're doing too. Like, yeah, I'd love to hear that too. Number of attendees would be curious to me too.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how many details we're going to be able to get in a little question.
Tell us your entire RFP right now in the chat.
Yeah.
And again, don't worry, we're gonna get to questions. There's quite a few questions coming in, and we're gonna get there. Now we're just love to know let's see, late September in Washington, D.C. Yes.
Regina, who said that? What's the person's name so we can give them a
Lisa
shout out?
Gillette. Lisa.
Lisa. Love it.
Cool.
Awesome.
Jen Sanford. Jen has a meeting in Reno at the end of July, and they're announcing the hybrid option today.
Ooh!
Ooh, yeah.
So this is cool, very relevant. Thank you. Anybody else out there?
Keep them coming. Regina, can we go into some of the questions that they're coming into? I think maybe we can dive into some of those if you're okay with it.
Well, I was thinking the same thing, Will, because I think we can be a little bit flexible with the playlist here. And then maybe we'll just remembering our theme of the pitfalls to avoid. Okay, so let's see. Oh, I have a hybrid meeting in Tokyo in October.
Wow, great.
This is Christina. What are your best practices for international meetings over several continents? Who would like to address that?
I got tons of tips, so Steph, you go first.
Yeah, I really haven't done a ton of international, like global events. Mine have been mostly North America. So Will, go ahead and shoot.
Oh, I feel like that's all I've been doing this last year is international events. I think that it's given us such a great opportunity. So shouts to you for thinking globally, especially right now. Like our hybrid events have to be international too. Like we just realized we're like, we need to start asking people like how many people are planning a US event, but we're planning on tapping an international audience because right now, like that virtual component is so critical for them. So yeah, when it comes to the international component, I think one thing to think about first is that the communication and the translation specifically is what I'm thinking about, captioning, translation, everything like that. Especially when it comes to budgeting, it can get expensive really, really, really fast, depending on which languages you need to add. So I think that's one thing I want to think about is that, like, is there some common languages that we can do to try to reduce costs? So for example, if 75% of the audience speaks good English, like let's try to lean on English as much as the primary language of the conference. But for example, you're going to Tokyo, maybe Japanese is going to end up being the main language for it as well. So maybe you're going to have English, Japanese, and then maybe a couple other key markets for you. But a big mistake I see is that they go, okay, well, we have an attendee in Germany, one attendee, let's translate it to German. And like, basically every single time you add a language, it's like almost taking your cost of your production up by 10, 15%, because you have to add a translator for that. You have to add a captioner. I don't recommend AI captioning, AI translation yet. If you're like, I need to absolutely save money and quality is not an issue, like I'm okay with quality being meh, you can go with an AI translation, but it's not 100% there. And then also think about your technology. I know for a fact Eventry is an example of one of them that can support multiple languages. So then that way you can be able to allow people to come in and see the platform in their native language. But again, translation costs. You might need to have a translator come in and change the navigation to make it match on that end. So that's one thing I think about when it comes to it. The other thing I think about too is that when you go global, you're creating a 24-hour event as well. So think about the fact that you might have to program 24 hours worth of content, or you're going to really need to be strategic about when certain things are happening. When you think about like a local event, you think like general session in the morning, breakout rooms, lunch, breakout rooms, closing session. Well, it might be like the general session's in the middle because that's what crosses every single time zone perfectly. It might be that you don't do a closing session because for someone they're going to bed right after the general session. So I think that's the one thing I think about when it comes to the design of an event. And I think somebody who's experienced in doing this sort of stuff really can help you think through it. I could probably do a whole presentation on this for an hour. So I'm going to shut up though, and I'll hand it over to Brad though, because you guys do a ton of international events.
Yeah, Will, what comes to my mind is a software company that we work with. They're actually a customer of ours. They went public, and so they came to us to help deliver their first global leadership conference. So they had all their key executives around the world, and there are a number of things, like you said, translation. So they leveraged the fact that we have all our system fields in 40 different languages. Then the other aspect was timing. They wanted everyone to hear their new CEO talk about the vision for the company. So they did have to put it around noon Central Time so that people in Europe as well as people in Asia could pay attention and be live during that session. And then they broke the agenda actually across 5 days into subsections of days, if you will. So it wasn't a full 8-hour grind, if you will. They broke it into components of about 3 to 4 hours. So the content organization became very important. Translation, as you said, is very important. We found some real economical ways to work with translators for simultaneous translation. But I can't emphasize enough your point about don't go crazy on this. Pick the vast majority. And the last item or tidbit that I'll leave you with is connectivity. So for instance, in China, you've got to test that, and you've got to be aware, okay, how does this work for the Chinese contingent? So we ran some tests with because they had a large contingency from China, and it ended up working beautifully. So but the internet there could be throttled up and down. It can have challenges if you don't test it. So thankfully, the whole event went off without a hitch, and it was a great start because talk about sweating that one. The first big show for the entire leadership team of this newborn company, public traded company. So it was critical, and they relied on us. Also, the last one being security. Security, I can't emphasize that enough right now. That's so important. But what they also did then, which I thought was brilliant on their part, is they took components of the sessions that they had recorded, put them in a library for mid-management, but they selected which ones so they could extend the reach of the messaging, flow and filter down the culture that they want to establish as a company. And they use the virtual recordings very effectively for that.
And I was going to mention that too. It's cheaper too to caption and translate audio after the fact versus trying to do it live too. You know, you can go to rev.com and caption it in a different language for not $10 anymore, but $100 for an hour-long video now.
Cool. We're going to get to some budget questions, and thank you, Will and Brad. Really great tips. The next question, which I'd like to throw to Steph, came in from Matthew, and I think it's especially applicable to those planners who are considering a hybrid event for the first time. The question is, how do we avoid cannibalizing our in-person offerings and attendance?
That's been
That's a dreaded question.
Yeah, for years.
I didn't say it would be easy.
Yeah, no.
Steph got that one.
Well, and I have had to give an answer to this question, you know, from lots of different leaders and that kind of thing. And really, you're looking at two different audiences, and you're not cannibalizing an audience member from being in person versus going virtual. It's just two very different outlooks and two different experiences, and you want them to both be high quality, but they are different. And so you're not taking one and feeding it to the other. You know, that just doesn't happen. You know, like I said, it's just two different audiences. Brad, what do you think?
It's funny. This came up with a planner just today in conversation, and they had just run an event, and their in-person attendance did go down. And I said, well, what was how did you price your tickets for your event? Was there a difference between the in-person and the virtual? He said, well, we gave virtual free, and then we charged for the in-person. And I said, well, where's the incentive for people to want to congregate? You're actually making it more expensive on top of their travel and other things. So I said, take a look at your drivers, behavior drivers to the people. If anything, you want to, in one part for your sponsors, reinforce, And they're a critical component to driving good content is sponsor funding. So how best can I help matchmake my sponsors with the attendees and create a really interactive experience? But then also for those who can't come in, what can I do to market to them after the event? Maybe how's what I recommended to this planner is I said, look, drive your communications around the in-person experience is where it's at. You don't want to miss that. But if you can't make it, we understand that, and we're going to show content afterwards for the keynote and the top 10 voted sessions. And that's going to be a separate ticket price. It'll be packaged separately. So you satisfy both audiences without cannibalizing either one.
Mm-hmm.
Can I jump in and add some additional stuff too?
Yeah.
You guys, oh my gosh, you both said such incredible things, and I agree 100%. One thing I think is that I've been a big proponent throughout the entire pandemic that you need to charge more for your virtual meetings too, that they're expensive to put on. This stuff costs money, and to do it right, you need to put production value behind it and everything like that. Yes, you're going to see a little bit of a dip in attendees, but then you're going to increase the quality. Then those attendees are going to go to the people who didn't go and say, yeah, you missed out, right? And they're going to then come the next year. And I think that the same way needs to be applied to hybrid events, that having a virtual audience at the same time as an in-person audience will not decrease the amount of tickets that you have unless you give it away for free. But instead, what it should do is sell them on the in-person experience and why they have to go next year. A great example of this is Ultra Music Festival. They've been ahead of this game for the live streaming concert experience. A concert, a festival, this is really hard to recreate unless you got like a banging sound system in your living room and you got laser lights and things like that, right? It's really, and you can pack 1,000 friends into your apartment. I don't know, but for years, I used to watch the Ultra Music Festival, and I remember that I watched it for 2 years in a row, and I was like, next year, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna buy my tickets to it, and I was committed. And honestly, if I didn't have such a crazy travel schedule and was running a company and it landed the same day as one of our biggest events every year, I would have been there 100%. And it was because I saw the live stream and saw the experience that was getting created. And what's ironic is that event, they did give it away for free. Not completely free, but instead what they did is they had little clips of every single set, and they were bouncing between stages. So you didn't get to watch all of David Guetta's main set, but you got to watch little pieces of it, and it sold you on that experience. And I think that if you charge for your experience, your virtual experience, so you can elevate your production to that level, it's going to complement it, and it's going to make people want to be at your in-person experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, and if I can throw in, oh, go ahead, Brad.
No, Steph, go ahead.
Oh, you both kind of touched on this, but you mentioned this third audience, which is the people that don't attend either of them. And in terms of like monetization, you've got, that group of people to attract with all of your recorded content. And if you polish it up and make it, high production value, that kind of thing, you really, can just create a whole nother audience that will want to come next year, or at least attend virtually, if not in person. So,
that is definitely something that I'm seeing is the quality of production going way up. People, the attendee experience has totally risen, and they are more accustomed to subscribing to that video content later. I mean, think about Netflix. We're now, because of COVID, we're living in a Netflix world, or an Apple world, Apple Plus, or a Disney Plus, or next it'll be Brad Plus. I mean, who knows? But it's one of those things that in other conversations I've had with planners, they keep saying to me, Brad, a hybrid event is like planning 2 full events at the same time. How do we staff and resource that? How do we charge for that where we can make any money at the end of the day? We're killing ourselves. I said, absolutely. And if you expect to do it the same way you did yesterday, you're not going to make it with 2. You've got to change it. You've got to change the expected outcomes, because it is a richer, you can make it a richer experience, but that there's a cost that comes with that. And no one's telling you, I expect you to do it the same exact way. And if they are, you've got to educate them to the fact that I am planning 2 events here with the equipment and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Thank you, Brad. And I think we have several questions about the budget, which I'll get to. And I also want to encourage everyone to keep the questions coming. They're great questions, really interesting. Um, uh, let's start in general, and then I'll get to a few specific questions, because it sounds like budgeting for a successful and effective hybrid event, it's going to be expensive. So, uh, what are the most common mistakes that you see being made around the budget, and what are the workarounds? Because, for example, one of the questions Cindy asked, how do you make hybrid events financially feasible for small meetings of under 250 people? You know, so who would like to start?
I'll start and then
Okay,
hand
Brad.
it over to my colleagues here, Will and Steph. But number one starts out with the average planners relying on 5 to 6 tools to plan their technology tools to plan their event. I mean, hello, just do the math. Go to one tool, one solution that offers all of that to handle beginning to end. I mean, that right there is cost savings, because you've got to be more judicious when it comes to hybrid events of where you're going to invest. I already mentioned you've got to invest more in production quality, because that's an expectation that will keep your attendees coming back. You've got to make sure and invest in some contingency. I'd recommend a 15% contingency fund for the unexpected, because there will be some unexpected expenses. Maybe the internet at your venue isn't strong enough and needs to be enhanced. Maybe there are other components along the way. So I'd also pay close attention, if you do have sponsors, how are you rewarding those sponsors throughout the event to make sure that they feel they're getting the value, because they'll help underwrite your event overall and give them extended opportunities to promote their product. Did I just say Kiwa Island? I think so. But those are important things,
Right.
because we wouldn't be here without them.
Correct.
They help deliver the content, and with after event recordings, there are actually new revenue streams. One of the biggest mistakes I've seen is planners just focus on the expense and the increased expense in certain buckets, but they've totally forgotten to look at how they can drive additional revenue. And I'm not saying unjustifiably, I'm saying drive additional revenue through true value by delivering better events. So Will, I know you're an expert in this. You get asked this 5 times a day.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the budgeting question, I think, is the number one question, followed by the fear of cannibalization. And yeah, how do you end up bringing those audiences closer together? When it comes to the budgeting portion, my strategy is, in the beginning, let's think about this like a VIP experience, because again, we're not going to be rushing to be bringing tons and tons of people in person. As much as we're like gaming for, hey, I had a 400 person meeting last year or pre-COVID, now I can bring that 500 people together all vaccinated. There's going to be people who are now going to say, you know what, I'm going to pick one conference I'm going to attend a year, but those people are going to go so deep into it. So what I think is a big play when it comes to your budgeting to get for the revenue operations, first of all, all the stuff about sponsors, so important. But when it comes to attendees, treat it like a VIP experience. Again, like if you're going to bring 25 people into a room, and when it comes to those hybrid event models that Jennifer posted a link to a little bit earlier, please go check that out. When it comes to the first, star model, it's about this small, intimate audience. I will tell you right now, I would rather go to an event that's curated amongst all the people that 25 of, let's say it's an event for event CEOs. I'd rather go to an event that has 25 of the best event CEOs that we can see the content, collaborate with each other, meet each other, build a deep relationship. I'd pay more money for that than to try to go to a conference that has everybody at it, and that is then charging less. I'd rather get that tighter curated experience, especially now that I'm going to be obscenely picky about what conferences I go to, now that I can enjoy the content on demand, online, and everything like that. And yeah, I think that when it comes to the production value, I'm obviously all for that. If anyone knows me, I've been preaching production value for years. But I love to say that, no one gets, everyone's talking about Zoom fatigue, webinar fatigue, but no one's talking about Netflix fatigue or Disney Plus fatigue. So you got to go with that production value and bring that production value with your sponsors, because they want to be a part of that high production value. They want to be, these crazy, beautiful animation graphics with their brands. They want to take that and repost that on social media, and you can use that as assets to monetize and make more money as well. So I'll toss it over to Steph.
Yeah, great thoughts, Will and Brad. Just to talk a little bit about the revenue piece, and Will, I think you touched on it a bit, was just the value of a virtual experience and putting a price tag on that that's equal to the value of an in-person experience. The registration fee, keeping that the same. There's lots of arguments about, do you do that? Do you not do that? Is it really the same experience? Well, they're getting a whole library of content afterwards too. And so, they're really able to see everything, possible. So that's one thing to think about, is just keeping that price tag where it really probably should be. And that's a little bit higher than you might think. Another question I had with other clients is just about how to maximize the money that they do have, and how to utilize like their space at the hotel. For example, a client had a row of rooms at the hotel, ballrooms, and they wanted to put something in each of them, and they wanted to stream everything. And I said, well, we can definitely maximize the streaming, but you really have to like think about it in terms of rooms and days and that kind of thing, in terms of your labor and costs like that. So just having them relook at their schedule and move things around, the timetable or in rooms, really made more sense to them too, to maximize the budget that they did have. So that's just a couple of comments about monetization.
Excellent. Really great comments, you guys, and tips and information. We've actually had quite a few interesting comments come in from people who are getting started with their meetings again. And so I'm going to read them off real quick. Holly has a hybrid event planned for the end of July. Lauren has 2 small meetings planned, a hybrid for about 100 people and a virtual for 150 in July. Mackenzie is going to be in Indianapolis in October with a hybrid meeting. Penny is going to be at a socially distanced 20-person board meeting in the mountains of Colorado in August. Samantha has a small internal executive level meeting getting started, no hybrid element. The first live meeting for Lisa is in July with a high risk audience and no hybrid component. Mary has 2 September hybrid events in Charlotte and Dallas. We're seeing a lot of domestic destinations here, which makes sense. However, I might have mentioned it earlier, one in Tokyo, hybrid for 100 in person and 200 virtual. So we're seeing so many iterations of meetings coming back. It's fascinating. Cindy has a late October program booked in Washington, D.C. for about 150. Caroline is planning a seminar for 200 in Asheville, North Carolina this September, and we'll be recording the sessions. Samantha will be on the West Coast in the fall. Andrew will be having planning hybrid meetings for executive board meetings starting this month in San Antonio. Julie will be in Ann Arbor, Michigan in September for a hybrid meeting at, interestingly, the campus, college campus. Lauren will be in Stamford, Connecticut. And let's see, here's a good question. I'm now coming to questions. Okay, get ready. This is sort of interesting. Nikki asks, She notes that many of the large hotel companies have introduced hybrid meeting programs. And Will, you brought up alternative venues before. Her question is, what other types of venues or smaller hotels that you guys know of have introduced similar programs, or do you see them coming in the future?
Ooh.
Now, starting with the Marriotts and the Hiltons and the big chains.
Yeah, I won't spoil the webinar, so click the link and definitely check that one out. We go really in depth in it with pictures. It's beautiful. It's got like ideas. It's one of our best webinars we've ever done. But I'll give you a teaser of it, is that the first thing you're going to want to start with your event is consider doing it in a studio space, a place that has super fast internet, that has all the cameras and the switchers and the microphones already there. So you're not having to pay, to bring a huge production company in, or maybe it's renting a studio and bringing a production company in to do that sort of thing. But these controlled spaces where you can get a really high quality virtual broadcast, and put a little audience in it, create a little networking area outside, all these things like that. It's also really important. The one thing I think we haven't talked about yet too is COVID compliance, right? Like we need to make sure that we're being compliant when it comes to COVID. And so that means making sure that we're really thinking about venues. And I will admit, I bet you there's some people out there that work for some hotel brands who right now are ready to like kill me, who are like calling their boss, telling them to put an execution order on Will. There's a time and place for when it comes to these large venues, and they're going to be coming back. And there are also great examples of smaller, more boutique ones. But the thing was, before we used to have these gigantic conventions where we got forced into, the Gaylord properties and these larger hotel convention centers. We now have this opportunity to be a little bit more unique when it comes to it. So I think the first step is studios. The second step is then starting to get a little bit more funky venues, getting something that has like a crazy ocean view, getting something that has, everyone knows that one venue you would say, I would have loved to have a venue here, but it just can't hold the number of people. That's the venue we're going to be going back to, I think, 100%. So.
Cool. Thank you, Will. We have what I think is an interesting wrap-up question from Oscar, who has 5 hybrid meetings planned in Miami and Europe for 500 to 700 people starting in August. And Oscar asks, this is a fun one, for all the panelists, can you provide ideas to keep the virtual audience engaged? We've already covered some of this, but I think it would be fun to, throw out your few most compelling ideas to keep the virtual audience engaged. Let's see. Steph, let's start with you.
Yeah. Sure. So you have to have a virtual MC, at least one of them. Someone, and it could be the funny guy from accounting, that serves as your virtual MC. You don't have to necessarily pay for talent to come in, although that's also an option. But you definitely have to have that piece that engages with the audience and is the voice of the audience. And so for sure, you need that person. You need them to be interviewing people during the breaks, during the meals, keeping content rolling. Because if you're watching TV, the screen never goes black. There's always commercials or something going on. And so you too need to make sure that you're providing some kind of value for the attendees during that break time. Will,
Excellent.
you're pretty excited. What are you thinking?
That's like
Okay,
such a great tip. Like that's one of my favorite tips to say too, is the virtual MC is good. Also figuring out a way that you can put them in like their own like studio, that then attendees who are like, instead of going to the lunchroom, they can go and watch the little studio, or you can even sell tickets. HubSpot's inbound conference sells tickets to go watch the live stream studio if you're at the in-person event. Like that's such a great monetization offer. Okay, so when it comes to engagement, I do whole presentations on this one. So let me pick my number one thing that you can take home with you, Oscar, is I think one of the best things that you can do is and this is gonna be a big challenge. I know I'm asking everybody to really have to think creatively. You got to figure out a way for in-person attendees to meet your virtual attendees. That's going to be the biggest challenge. That's like what I call hybrid 2.0, which is probably coming later this year. I know like there's some awesome tools like Eventury that are working on trying to make that even easier for that to happen. And so I think one important thing is like, let's figure out a way that we can create a seamless experience where someone can get a meeting booked, they're in person attending, and be like, oh, that person's virtual, I don't want to meet with a virtual person. Nope. Oh, they're second-class citizens now. We don't want that. So now let's find a way to instead make it so I go, oh my gosh, Brad's just matched with me, and he's tuning in from his office right now, and I'm in person. I've been wanting to meet Brad, or sure, I'd be really interested in meeting Brad. And I go out and do my meeting. My idea is in the future is we're going to have pods all around the venue that you can literally walk up and be like, oh, I'm in pod A with Brad. I walk in and Brad just pops up on the screen. We have our meeting and walk away, right? Versus like, oh, hey, let me get to a quiet part of the venue and, try to find a way to do that. Mean we end up going back to our hotel room and disconnecting from the entire event. But I think if you can find a way for those attendees to meet each other, that's when people will not question whether I should be in person or I should be virtual, to again, full circle, since we're going to closing, to bring the quality of experience to both of them, and they can have that same level of quality experience. So
And I would just, those are great, Steph and Will. I would just add, make it inclusive. Just so, for instance, take Eventer, you've got a mobile app for the on-site people. You've got in the virtual product, they could do polling together. They could vote together. They can ask Q&A together. So at the same time, so the diversity of where these events are being held can be viewed and appreciated to the entire audience just because of their diverse viewpoints. But then also incorporate some fun things, like maybe do again, for the in-person as well as virtual, maybe do a cocktail session for an hour where they design their own drink. I mean, I participated in one of those. It was fun. And there was no difference between whether I was virtual or in person. They sent the materials to people's homes. So it could be that, it could be something else that just gets them doing something together, showing their creativity. I participated in one where it was a musician that, whether you were in person or virtual, it was a live musician hired by the organization. It was beautiful and it worked. I mean, I was skeptical when I first came into it. Like, I don't know how this is going to work, but it came off beautifully. So it's I would say first take a look at how can I bring to life and show appreciation for the diversity of my audience, where regardless of where they are located or how they're viewing the event or participating in the event.
Thank you, Brad. And we are almost out of time. So I would like to thank all our fabulous panelists today, Will, Steph, Brad. You were just wonderful, and we appreciate your time and the great content. And I would like to remind everyone that this session was recorded, and you will get a link to the recording because there are a lot of great ideas to unpack. Thanks again, and wishing everyone a great day and much success and fun with your next meetings. I have one last message to you. There's another free webinar coming up called the Ultimate Incentive Experience. It's May 25th at 1 p.m. And you can follow the link that you see on your console to Prevue to learn more about this next webinar. So thanks again, everyone. Bye.
thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.